As a mixed media collage artist, I often need to think about the different types of materials that are available to me when I sit down to make my artwork. And when we talk about collages, oftentimes it comes down to the papers that we use. And in this episode of Mixed Media Masters, I want to share with you 12 different paper sources that you might consider as well when you're working on your own projects. Hello makers, and welcome to the studio. If this is your first time here, good to have you. Please feel free to look around. If you see anything you like, we're here every single week. Hit that subscribe button and you'll be notified when new things happen. And if you just like it, hit that like button. It helps us out an awful lot. Now, as promised, this week I want to talk about different types of papers and maybe things that are close to papers that we can use for our collage projects. I'm going to share with you some of the things we've worked on in the past and give you hopefully some new ideas for what you might approach in the future. And the first thing I want to share with you is colored paper. Now, if you've been with me for a while, you've seen that I really do love working with the colored paper that I have. And a lot of the stuff that I work with comes out of books like these from Craftsmart. Now, these are hard to find. I don't think they're being made anymore. But one of the things that was wonderful about them is basically it was a palette at your fingertips, an opportunity to be able to go through and choose the colors you want. And of course, a lot of them are themed based upon things like reds, or here's some seafoam greens, or closer to the greens, or maybe you want to go with blues, right? So an opportunity to be able to choose the different colors you want, and these are just a fantastic thing to have on a shelf and pull down when you need a specific palette to work with. Now, there are also some other variations on a theme, and one of the things that I really like are, well, these materials here, which is a different color on the different side of the paper. So it gives you a little bit more to work with in the sense that instead of being restricted to just one color, you can see we have more of a hot pink there and a bubblegum pink here, etc. So as I flip the page over, depending which side I end up using, I have two colors to choose from. And that's kind of cool as well. And of course, being able to just have a block of paper from this vendor as well, and be able to choose the colors that you want. Now, we can also work with good old-fashioned cardstock, colored cardstock. And if you go to your big box art supply store, you'll find things like this. And so again, you can choose different colors that you want to work with here. And we might have some in the orange and green family, or maybe something in the purples and the blues. But the point is simply that we have this palette of colors that are available to us that we can just sit down and be able to cut up, put down on our paper, and create whatever creations we want to create. Now, I do want to mention one thing that you may find useful to know, and that is that when we talk about these different types of papers, there is a slight difference between how they're manufactured. Let me just grab a sheet here, and I'll pull out one of these here. Grab that. So I have here from my 12 by 12 inch book a solid sheet of blue, and for my cardstock I have this purple. Now, they're both colored papers, but one is a printed color and one is a dyed color. What's the difference and why should you care? Well, you may not care in the long run, but the real difference is that if you're working with this paper and you're shredding edges, for example, if I come to this purple and I do something like this to it, you'll notice that the rag edge here is also purple. That's because this is a dyed piece of paper and the pigment has soaked all the way through here. Now, with this blue piece here, this is a printed piece of paper, which means there was a white piece of paper that got printed both sides. And if I come in here and do the same thing, I want you to notice that it reveals the white insides. Now again, you may not necessarily care depending on what you're doing, but if you are working with rag edges as part of your project, this might be something to keep in mind when you're buying these papers to make sure that you have something that will reveal the inside core color of the paper if you do something like that. Next, let's talk about what happens if you don't have the colors you want. Pre-painted paper. Now, why would we care? Why would we do this? Well, because sometimes the colors and the textures that you're looking for are not something that's going to come out of the big box store. They just don't have it. And sometimes when we're working with projects, we need something larger than the 12 by 12 sheet of paper that is the largest that I can buy on a regular basis. So there are times you might say, if I want a piece of paper that's larger than that, I have to make my own. And so you may remember if we worked on a project not that long ago, but we came in and I painted up some various pieces of paper. And so here's an example of one right here. And what this allows me to do is to go and create something that's a larger size. I can make it as big as the piece of paper I have. And this allows me to come in and I can use this as my color, cut it out, tear it, do whatever the heck I want with it. And so I can go and very closely control the colors that I use for these projects. That's working with an acrylic paint. I can also come in and do something very similar using a watercolor if that's what I want to be able to do. And so with a product like this, come in and paint it up. You can cut different sections out. And I've worked on a few different projects. Here's one that I worked on not so long ago called Points of Light. And all I really did is I went to various pieces of paper and I painted them with watercolor first, and then I punched them out. And actually, here's the leftovers of what that looks like, almost a piece of artwork in itself. But you can see where all the different cutouts came from to pull this different piece together. Now, you may also find yourself in a situation where you have projects that maybe didn't come to fruition, right? So you sat down and you said, hey, I'm going to paint some things together. And you know what? I never ended up using it for whatever reason. What can I do with them in the future? Because, you know, if you're going to be a good artist, you got to learn how to be a hoarder a little bit too, right? There's always an opportunity to reuse some of these things. So an opportunity to go into your archives and say, all right, what the heck do I do with these different things that I've created is an opportunity, once again, to save these pieces of painted paper and use them in future collages. I'll share that this piece here was a piece that was created using a hole punch. So once again, going into the watercolor painted paper and to be able to punch out these individual dots and then glue them together and put them into this type of a format as an experiment is another possibility. So keep in mind, if you can't go buy the paper that you want, go make your own. And that's going to bring us to topic number 3. Not all the paper you buy in the big box store is going to be paper that's designed for the purposes of creating collage. And the beautiful thing about collage is there's no right way to do it. And one of the things I find very useful is working with smaller colored papers that usually come in the form of an origami paper kit. So being able to come in here, of course, this is a lighter paper as opposed to a cardstock, but it gives you some flexibility and also a number of different colors and patterns to work with. And here's an example of some patterns on one side and solid colors on the other side. And again, what you do with these is really up to you, but when you're layering these into a project, it can make a huge difference as to what the outcome is going to be. So that's a pretty cool thing to have. Now, I'll also mention that there are specialty paper books that you can purchase. Here's one on Japanese shibori, which is gift wrapping sheets. These were given to me by a friend. I haven't had a chance to use these at all yet. But again, these pre-printed pieces of paper that if I wanted to come in here and pull a shape out of here, and these are fairly large, these expand to a much bigger piece because they are designed to be wrapping paper. But you can work with that. And of course, rolls of wrapping paper, those can get pretty big as well. So that'd be something to consider as well. And here's some things for some Indonesian batik wrapping papers. And here's some decorative paper from Dale Chihuly collection. Pictures of different glassware that you might be able to work with. So keep in mind, there are collections of pre-printed papers that you also might be able to draw from and find your inspiration and materials for your collage. And this brings us to paper source number 4. And that is tissue paper. I love working with tissue paper in a number of projects, and we created this a few weeks ago. You may remember this. This allowed us to work with just a very thin glue water mixture that really just takes the tissue paper and lays it down nicely on the paper. And one of the nice things about tissue paper is it is transparent or translucent to a certain degree, and it gives you some interesting effects. And again, if you're mixing this with colors on top of something else you're building, you can really create something that's pretty impressive. It's a very affordable material to work with, little unwieldy. Once you take it out of the package, it's hard to get it back in. Now, I'll also mention as part of this is that you might also use something like tracing paper. And again, the beautiful thing about working with something like tracing paper is that it gives you that translucency that might be very interesting. So if I wanted to take something and say, put a pencil drawing on this paper and put this paper on top of something else, I can create all sorts of really cool effects using something like that. So a consideration with anything that's kind of translucent and tissue paper. And I'll mention one other thing which is just a little bizarre, but I pulled it out of one of my drawers, and that is an old pattern. So I don't know if you remember any kind of sewing patterns. This may not be something. My mother had sewing patterns when I was growing up. And so an opportunity to come in with these tissue papers and to reuse these interesting things. Now, you may not find anything in here that makes you go, wow, that's really useful. But again, you know, when we look at any of the materials we have just readily available around us, it's surprising how many of them can really be converted into some sort of art. So anyway, as a transparent or translucent style of paper, I thought I'd mention that. So an old sewing pattern, if you happen to have one lying around, could also be something you could work with. Which brings us to our next topic. Now, in my office, I have a drawer called ephemera. Now, traditionally, ephemera were things that you saved, things like cards and calling cards and greeting cards and things that were usually kind of flowery and more about memorabilia and nostalgia. I use kind of more of a bucket grouping here of ephemera as anything that kind of just got discarded. Let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. So I live outside of New York City, and so when I'm in the city, oftentimes I'm on the prowl because there's so much great art supplies all over the sidewalk. And so you can find things like, you know, hey, what can I do with this pesticide application sign? Here's something which is some instructions for something. Here, by the way, an official New York City parking ticket that somebody was kind enough to leave in the gutter for me. You know, tickets for airlines or trains or, you know, anything. Here's a candy wrapper. You know, so I find a lot of things which catch my attention because they're bright and colorful, they're shiny. You know, you find the strangest things just sitting around on the sidewalk. Anyway, I picked them up and I put them in my drawer so I can use them again in the future in some way. Now, I haven't created a garbage collage lately, but I put it out there as a possibility, again, using products, empty containers, cereal boxes, candy boxes, whatever you have, being able to cut elements out of here and incorporate them in your work can really change things up, can really make it exciting, and also just make it a lot of fun to build something. So putting it out there, again, ephemera, castaways, whatever you call them, these are the types of things that we could really take advantage of, and they're cheap and plentiful. And that brings us to our next topic. Now, cheap and plentiful, oftentimes the things that we're going to discard in our lives can become a source of inspiration and or materials. Now, one of the things that I do from time to time is I sit down and I cut out magazine pieces. And when I go through magazines, often I'm looking for advertising or elements that allow me to cut out blocks of color. And I have these envelopes that I stuff all my different colors into to kind of break them down by palettes. So for example, I have this one which is yellows and oranges. This one here is more about neutral colors and pinks. I've got a blue folder here. I've got a green folder here, etc. Here's some pinks and reds and some purples and blues. What's really fun about these is that they're really fun to work with. And not long ago, we created a project together here on the channel, which is right here. It's called Retail Therapy. And that's in the studio if you want to take a peek at it. But the point simply is that working with these papers, which would just be throwaways, right? We just say, let's just recycle the magazines. Instead, I can go through them and get a little extra life out of them and create something that I can put into my folders and save them for a day when I want to sit down and create a magazine paper-based collage. So that is another source for papers that we might not think about that can give us a lot of life. Let's take a look at the next topic. We've talked about magazines. Now let's talk about its younger brother, comic books. Now, I have a good collection of comics in my life, and I don't want to go and cut them up. So one of the things you can do is you can go to a source like Amazon and buy old comic books in bulk, because you're going to cut them up. You don't have any relationship with them, and they're generally not worth an awful lot outside of that. So cut them up all you want. And I have a great collection. I have something here from 1972, a British tabloid newspaper of sorts, a comic book. So lots and lots of fun stuff in here. And if you were with me for the creation of ARG, which is a collection of different sound effects pulled entirely out of comic books, you'll know we spent a fair amount of time working with comic books. Great source, and it also gives us an opportunity, depending on what we're trying to do here, to be able to collect certain things. So for example, I have here a couple of just plastic bags that I've saved some things in. Here are some sound effects left over from my last project if I need to use those. Here's one with just eyes. Yeah, you go through and you say, hey, what would it look like if I had a whole bunch of eyes cut out of comic books that I could put into something in the future? Again, you don't often know what you're going to do with these things, at least I don't, but being able to go through these comic books and be able to pull out different elements, whether it's, people flying or explosions or whatever's going to make your artwork really speak to the people who are looking at it, right? That's what we want to be able to do. So being able to use old comic books to bring new life to our art, that is a great source as well. Which brings us to our next topic. And the next is newspapers. Now, I'm not necessarily talking about your daily paper, although you can certainly use that. We'll talk about free use in a future video, but just be assured that when you're using content for the purposes of creating artwork as opposed to copying an article and saying, I wrote this article and I'm going to republish it, you're in pretty good shape. There are some limitations of what you can do. But I find I go, when I'm in the city, I'll go past the box that has the Chinese newspaper. I don't know what that says. I cannot read Chinese. I'm also not very, very talented when it comes to things like Spanish. Here's some newspaper I brought back from a recent trip to Morocco. Yeah, exactly. I'm not very good in Arabic, come to think of it. But it's a very interesting look and feel. And again, when we're incorporating these elements into our collages, what we do with this content can make a big difference. Give it a global feel of sorts, or just maybe something that's going to really just from a design standpoint work together. Now, hopefully you don't clip out something that you probably don't want to put into a piece of artwork and stick it up there. But anyway, newspapers and any printed materials can be really, really useful in the creation of any type of collage. So I want you to keep in mind, again, not that I'm suggesting you just keep piles and piles of newspaper around. I have a small pile here, but the kinds of things you might find influence and inspiration from in the future. And that brings us to our next topic. Now, I may have a paper problem. I love a lot of paper, and I love a lot of handcrafted papers. And oftentimes I'll get things. This was something I actually was wrapping another gift, and it's a handmade piece of paper. I believe it's a rice paper of some sort. I have some other rag edge papers that I purchased in the past. Here's some that are stained probably with tea to give them a sense of looking more elderly. But the point is simply that there's some beautiful things in these papers, and we can draw on them, we can paint on them with watercolors, with acrylics. We can use all sorts of other types of pastels or even colored pens to really bring these to life. So being able to use some of these pieces of paper and just, again, have a good collection of some rag cotton papers or some rice papers, mulberry bush papers, whatever they are. There are a whole bunch of different things that are out there. And boy, you can really have a good time with these as well. Which brings us to our next topic. Now, I'm not the blingiest person around, but I have found some of my paper books in the past which really inspire because, yeah, if you want something that's glittery, you've got glitter. And so these papers have a little bit of texture in them as well. Different collections. Here's our jewel glitter. This is definitely much more textured if that's the kind of thing you want to be able to put into your artwork, okay? But being able to grab people's attention with a spot of glitter is kind of cool. Here's a collection that offers some sort of foil, different colored foils that you can work in your materials as well. So something that's a little bit more metallic, which brings us to another point, and that is we don't think of it as paper because it isn't necessarily, but we can use our good old-fashioned aluminum foil to create some really interesting effects. The thing that's really nice about aluminum foil is you can paint on this. You can make textures on it with different tools. You can crumple it up and uncrumple it and then have something that really, really has some very cool texture that you can work with. And you smooth that out, you paint on that, and you have something that really is going to be something that stands out as a spot of color or some shine within your artwork. To that point, I also want to mention one other thing, which again is not technically a paper, but can be very helpful, and that is you can buy metal foils in bulk. I have a collection of some here. Let me pull them out. Now these are similar to what you might see if you're working with gold leaf. Okay, now these are not gold. I believe these are aluminum, but what it allows us to do is, again, these are incredibly, incredibly thin. See, this is really just the thinnest thing in the world. And if I want to put this down, I can put a little spot of glue on my paper, and then tap this into place and it will stick to wherever the glue is put. Again, it can be really helpful with creating a little bit of shine and a way to kind of anchor the viewer's eye to a section of what you're working with, right? So that's some rose. I have some purple color. I have some green. I have some blue in here. I think I have some black. And, you know, strangely enough, I have some gold as well. But a great collection of things to have, again, for anyone creating collages, an opportunity to create that spot of color, which also grabs people's attention due to the metallic sheen as well. All right, let's take a look at our next topic. Now, one of the things that you notice when you're an artist is that you'll find art supplies anywhere, including the big box hardware stores. And one of the things I'm delighted to share with you is that every so often you can find rolls of paper. Now, this is the red rosin paper, which builders use a lot of the time. A lot of times they'll tape this down in areas that people are walking on to prevent floors from being tramped on or being scratched up. And so this is really designed to be a paper that is to be trod upon. But if we look at this, and buying a whole roll of this compared to a roll of art paper is just pennies on the dollar. Trust me on that. So we have this brown craft paper, which is a lot thicker, that you can do a lot of cool things with paint pens and painting and watercolor. And the red rosin, you have to have the red background if you want to have that. But being able to have these, just these huge rolls of paper to work with, and there's a lot of paper in here, depending what your needs are. I highly recommend going to your big box store and seeing what kinds of things you might be able to pull out of there that you can use to work on your projects. All right, let's look at our next topic. Now, once again, inspiration can strike wherever you are, and sometimes you may be looking at something that seems rather humble on the outside and find a real treasure on the inside. Now, I have a collection here of some corrugated colored papers. And so these are almost like very thin cardboard, which is kind of their nature. And one of the cool things about working with cardboard is because it is multi-ply, I can come in here, let me grab this purple one here and my utility knife. And if I wanted to work a shape out here, I could cut through one layer. Let's go something like this. And then if I come in here, it's very easy for me to just peel away that one layer and reveal the underneath. So what's cool about this, of course, is that I'm revealing the white color in here, but I'm also revealing this white texture, if that's the kind of thing that could really dress up my project. Now again, not everything I'm showing here is every solution for every project we're working on. These are all just examples of different things that we might utilize, right? So there we are. We have some corrugated, and of course using standard cardboard boxes, right? If you're getting Amazon delivering a lot to your house and you have the stuff to recycle, you can do some pretty impressive stuff using cardboard. Here's an example of a cardboard project that I created a couple years ago. By the way, this is a combination of corrugated cardboard and comic book pages. And together they created this project. So some very cool things that you can do, again, with simple corrugated, or maybe not so simple, more corrugated papers. And the final thing, kind of a baker's dozen extra bonus, is stickers. Now, I get stickers for a number of things. Sometimes you have stickers that you're using for labeling things, but oftentimes working with vendors, they'll send me some stickers for things that they have, which are kind of fun. I just kind of keep them in a box. Some product stickers that I bought, some just whimsical things that might be kind of fun to use in the future. I have stickers that came in from technology. So things for gaming based upon a monitor I purchased recently or some sort of keyboard, they come in here. They all go in the box of stickers. But anyway, some very cool things, again, that can be really used to dress up your project. Something, maybe that last thing that just hit it with that sticker. Something to really make it stand out from the crowd and be something very interesting. Anyway, that's what I wanted to share with you today. And I realize it's a relatively simple topic, but when we're sitting down to work on projects, sometimes what really makes a project work or not work is what it's made up of. And the textures and the layering and the colors and the shapes and all those things work together. And we can create some stuff that's really fun, really whimsical, and of course, combining not only the paper we're working with, but an opportunity to create mixed media by putting paint on there and pastels and colored pencils and whatever we want to work with. It really is up to us, right? So I want you to be able to feel comfortable, go out there, find whatever materials you want to work with and say, this is going to be the materials I'm putting into my collage. You're going to run some bold experiments. Sometimes you're going to find things that work really well. Sometimes you're going to find things that may not work so well, but either way, Every time you do something, it's a learning experience, and you always walk away with a deeper understanding of how these materials can work and work for you. Anyway, that's all I have for you this week. Thanks so much for joining me. It's Spider. I'll see you next time.